Hey guys, Sam Miller from Pano Precision. Today we're going to look at the Henderson Precision Gen 2 powered case trimmer. Okay, if you reload for very long, you'll soon come to find out that trimming brass really sucks, especially if you have a big volume of it to do like I do. So if you're a competitive shooter like a PRS shooter, or you shoot high power, or you shoot 3-gun, or anything like that where you hand load your own ammunition, you know from experience that trimming brass is one of those chores in reloading that's just no fun at all. So typically what you would do is you'd crank up a manual lathe type trimmer, or even the world's finest trimmer or something like that, cut the brass to length, and then you do deburr and chamfer it in a whole nother process. So you know, tools like power stations like the RCBS Brass Boss will help you with that, but you know, you still have to handle the brass multiple times and hold on to it, and it gets to be tedious. Alright, so what this machine does is it cuts the length, it chamfers the inside edge, and it deburrs the outside edge all in one swoop. So every time you feed the case in, it does all three operations simultaneously. Okay, so the first time I saw one of these marvelous case trimmers was at SHOT Show this past year. I was wandering around one of the booths and I happened to run into their booth, and I met Jason Chipley and Todd Henderson, and Jason gave me a demo of the trimmer. They had one set up there, and as he was feeding 223 cases in, almost as fast as he could hold on to them and push them in, they would just fall out the other side ready to rock. And I thought, man, I really got to try one of those things. And I actually have a friend or two that already owns these and speaks very highly of them. But anyway, I started out with a manual lathe like this guy. This is an old Forster, just a lathe type trimmer. It uses a collet down here to hold the case, the head of the case right here. You tighten it down to keep it in place, and then you feed in this piloted cutter that goes in the case mouth. You spin it, and then you pull that back out, and then you loosen this, pull the case out, start all over again. Well, ironically, almost 30 years later, here we are with this Henderson trimmer that uses some of the same stuff. So inside this handle is a Forster collet that holds onto the end of the case. And then up here on the motor end, we have what they call Forster calls it their three-way mouth cutter. So basically what it is it's two carbide blades that are set at an angle with a pilot sticking out of the middle. So as you feed the case in, it's cutting the outside edge, it's cutting the inside edge, and at the same time as you feed it in there, it's shortening the case up. So it does all three operations as you push that in. Okay, so one of the coolest things about this trimmer, and quite frankly one of the selling points to me, was the fact that you don't have to buy a bunch of different tools or shell holders or things like that to trim up a bunch of different kinds of cases. So, you know, basically whatever cutter head you buy, you can trim every cartridge of that caliber with that one cutter head. So this is a 6.5 cutter head, and with it I can trim my 6.5-47, my 260 Terminator, my 260 Remington. Now the 260 Remington and Terminator have the same trim to length, but they have very different shoulder dimensions. So from the shoulder to the end of the neck, they're very different. So I can't, you know, like when I was using my world's finest trimmer, I had to have two different inserts for that to make it work. With this, all I have to do is, I don't even have to do anything. I can trim 260 and 260 Terminator cases right out of the same bin at the same time without adjusting a thing, because they're the same overall length. The other thing about this is it basically runs on one collet. So the way Forster set up their collets, they have 3 of them, but the number 1 collet fits just about everything that most of us shoot. So everything from a 223 Remington up to a 300 Win Mag is how they have that step. So I don't remember the head dimensions. I believe we have a 379, maybe a 473, definitely a 473, that's like 260, 308, 6.5-47, up to 5 something, which is the Win Mags, in the Remington Mags, things like that. So with the number 1 collet, literally number 1 it's called, it looks like this, you can trim, you know, as long as it'll hold the case head, you can trim anything that fits. You can buy the Forster collets if you have a weird cartridge that doesn't fit in number 1. I think they're like 16 bucks or something. You can get them just about anywhere. But anyway, when you order this, you get 1 cutter head and 1 collet installed in the machine. Alright, so let's take a look at what this comes with. Obviously it comes with the trimmer. I have it mounted on my bench. It does not come with any kind of mounting hardware, so I have to come up with a way to actually put it down there. Now, the first night I used it, I just put some clamps, some C-clamps onto my bench and went to town with it. You know, it doesn't take much. But anyway, it comes with the trimmer. It comes with the one cutter head installed that you ordered. It comes with one collet already in the handle, and it comes with one stop screw installed. It comes with 4 other stop screws. Now these are just generic cap head screws. I think they're 5/16, 18. They put a nylon insert lock nut on them, and they're all just different lengths, and you can adjust those to whatever length you want. What those do is it stops the handle from going in. That's how you will adjust your length of cut. Now, you know, I have a 6.5 head installed. I also have a 308 head for doing 300 Win Mag cases. Now these are what the collets look like. These are the number 2 and number 3 collet. I don't know if I've ever even used these. These are from my other trimmer that I showed you earlier. But anyway, there's number 1 already installed in the handle, and that will cover everything from 223 up to 300 Win Mag and just about everything in between. So that's pretty handy. Now the only tools you're going to need to set this up and operate it are a 1/8 inch hex like this one. I'm using my T-handle, and that will remove the safety shield. A 5/64, and that will take your cutter head on and off if you need to change it out. A 1/4 inch hex for driving those 5/16 screws in and out, and then a 1/2 inch wrench for tightening down the lock nut. That's it. Alright, that's the motor and the switch assembly. It's a rotary switch, so it has a potentiometer. The motor is a 1/2 horse motor. It'll run up to 1700 RPM, and it is completely adjustable, so you can go all the way up to 1700 or anywhere in between. It has a simple on-off switch as well as the rotary switch here. Okay, and this is the handle that holds the collet, and the trim, you would just pull it out, put your case in the end, lock her down, push it in, pull it back out, unlock it, drop the case out. This is the stop screw right here that actually manually physically stops this slide from going in any further. So it actually makes it pretty easy to adjust the whole thing. We'll go over the whole process of coarse adjustment and fine adjustment on this, but it is really easy to do. Okay, so because I use my bench a lot for all kinds of different things, I don't want to ever leave anything permanently mounted to it. You can see I've got a barrel vise here, you know, so I'm always taking barrels on and off here. I put guns up here all the time, so nothing stays here permanently. So what I did was I installed a couple of brass inserts that are 1/4-20 right into the wood. So all I have to do is put this down, clamp her down. It works pretty well. So to take this off, all I need to do is take these 2 guys out and take it off my bench. That easy. And I can put it back same way. Now I know they're working on some kind of a mount and a bin setup that will, you know, be completely integrated, which will be a really cool idea. Until that day comes, all I did was I took this piece of channel that came with some, I don't know, there's some kind of generic bins you can get at Home Depot or Lowe's or wherever, and I just put a piece of it here that was about the length of this bin. So all I have to do is put that lip on it, and that's my brass catcher for now. And it's worked out very well. All right, let's trim a few cases here before I get into taking all this stuff apart and adjusting it. So what I have are some 6.5/47 cases. I'm going to leave one of my stop screws set up just for that. I'll mark it at the end of this video so I know which one it is. But I have it set up to cut at 1.840, which is 10,000 shorter than its max length. So let's just fire it up. And I just leave it on max speed. You just put a case in, lock it down with the handle, run it in, drop her. Nice thing about this is you can actually think. The noise isn't so bad. You can actually have a conversation with somebody. As you see, you can get going pretty fast on this. If I wasn't trying to avoid getting myself in the way of the camera and the tripod leg, I'd probably go a little bit faster, but I keep getting these things cocked a little bit on the collet because I'm not squared up. But it's really no big deal because this thing is actually self-centering, so I can loosen the collet if I wanted to, but the pilot actually guides it in and lines it up on your cutters. Burned right through that. I think it was 178 6547 cases there. Once you get going with this, you get going pretty quickly. But okay, let's back up a little bit here and take a peek at this brass real quick. Okay, so one of the things I was taught when I first started working on the lathe was how to check for burrs in something that I just cut. And that was just to take a Q-tip and rub it across the edges that you cut. And just look for hairs sticking to them. You can see there's just nothing sticking to those. Those are just cut very nicely, very cleanly. Okay, so Henderson Precision claims that you should be able to get no more than about 0.02 of variation when you're trimming any particular brand of brass. So in other words, if I go through 350 pieces of the 6547 Lapua brass that's all been fired 4 times, they should all come out within 0.02 of each other, and that's that's a pretty good standard to hold to. I don't really get wrapped around the axle about that too much. I'm more concerned with it not hitting the end of the chamber when I chamber that round to fire it the next time. But if you can get it that close, then more power to you. Now, I had this bolt set up for 1.840, which is 0.010 off the max for 6547. I didn't check anything though. I just cranked her down there, and it looks like it's about 1,000 shorter than where I had it before. So it's coming out 1.839. There's a bunch of 395s in there though. So anyway, it's been my experience that I'm getting better than what Henderson claims. In other words, I get 0.5 to 1,000 variation. And I'm sure a lot of that has to do with what kind of state your brass is in. Is it hard? Is it annealed properly? How many times has it been fired? Things like that. Okay, so one of the things that's a little bit different on this tool than all the other chamfering and deburring tools out there, at least that I've used, is I believe a standard VLD chamfering tool is 22 degrees, and the old standby, like the old RCBS deburring tools, they were cut at 45 degrees. So the Forster bit here, the inside cutter, is set so that it cuts that inside edge at 14 degrees, so it's very shallow. The outside is 30 instead of 45, so again, it's a little shallower than what we're used to using. But as you saw before, it passed the Q-tip test easily. It's very nice edges. I mean, you just can't feel any sharp edges at all on this. Just cuts very nicely. Now, I have loaded up. I shot my last match with cases that I'd trimmed on this. I felt no difference in seating pressure. I felt no difference in any kind of load on the press handle, and my ES and my accuracy and everything stayed the same. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of difference in what angle you chamfer your cases at as far as how it relates to accuracy and things like that. But whatever they're doing here works very well. Those are just very nice edges. Okay, let's talk about changing our depths, or our depth of cut. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this up now to trim Jake's 260 Remington cases. So 6547 and the 260 Remington, while they're the same caliber and the same case head, they are obviously a different length. The 6547 I trimmed to 1.840. My typical trim length for a 260 Remington, I believe, is 2.020. But what I'm going to do with Jake's is I'm going to cut them just a little shorter than that. So the first thing we want to do is unplug the machine. We got no electricity now. Now we take off our guard. So this shield comes off with a 1/8 inch hex key like this. This is a T-handle, makes it very easy. Now this is the stop screw I was using for the 6547. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to mess with that one. I'm going to use a different screw for the 260 Remington. That way I don't have to play with this anymore. All I have to do is take it off. That's all there is to it. I'll just leave this with the rest of my 6547 brass that I have to trim later. So I'm going to use a different screw. Now, I cheated on this a little bit. So what I'll do is I'll set it back, but all these stop screws come so that there's about 1.25 inches of thread showing off the end of the screw there. Now in the instructions they tell you that you want to have about 1/2 inch of thread into this boss right here. Okay, so you want this screw to be fully supported, so you don't want to screw it in and stop after a couple of threads and call her good. You want it to be in there about 1/2 inch or more. But there obviously is a limit because it stops back here, so you don't want to force anything. But what I'm going to do, I'll show you. I had this set for a 260 Remington. So when I feed that in there to the blades, it's not quite stopping on the screw. Barely not stopping on the screw. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to mess up my adjustment on that screw just so I can show you how to do this. Okay, so these screws are going to come so they look like that. So we have several different lengths. See, this one is already set for my 300 Win Mag, but the other three, you know, there's similar lengths behind the nut here. So you're going to pick one that's relatively close to what we need. We know those two long ones aren't it, and we know the short one isn't it. Although that short one probably would have worked for 6547. So I'm going to pick this one. I'm going to thread that in. I'm going to take my 260 case, put it in the collet, put it on the pilot, and you can see that that stops way short of the cutter blades, way short of it. So I need to screw that stop screw in until I contact the blades. Now I'm just on the blades, barely on the blades. So what I could do now if I want to be conservative is I would pull this back off and I'd tighten that lock nut down while holding the screw in place. And what that gives me is a good starting point for barely contacting the cutter with the end of the case. Now it's not a bad idea to measure this case to make sure that it is longer than what you actually want to trim to. So let's back up and do that real quick. So I'm going to double check. Doesn't hurt anything to measure several times. You can back the screw back towards you. You can actually hear that contacting. You can look down and see it. In fact, let me change the video a little bit. Okay, so you can see the stop screw and you can see the end of the case going over the pilot here. And just as it touches the blades, it's hitting that stop screw. So if we back the stop screw out even more, you can see that doesn't come anywhere near the cutter head now. So what we need to do is we need to shorten that screw up and let the case come closer to the cutter head. It's a lot easier to do when there isn't a video camera that you're trying to be careful with. Another way that's pretty effective is you just push that case in until it stops on the cutter head and then back the screw back out. If you had a feeler gauge, you could probably put a feeler gauge between the head of that stop screw and the stopper here on the handle, and it would give you the amount of travel that you would have to go in, which isn't a bad idea. But what we're going to do is we're going to do this the hard way. We're going to do it all trial and error. So what I'll do is I'll back that off. I'll just eyeball it, and I'm going to stop right there. Now I'm going to get this out of my way. So now what I want to do is I want to support the screw so it can't turn in and out. So I'm going to use my hex wrench here, my 1/4 inch. And run this nut down. Alright, so remember this is a 1/2 inch wrench and this is a 1/4 inch hex. Now that is tight and secure, so now we can try it. First thing we want to do is get our shield back on. We put some electricity back to it. Okay, so we have our lock nut tightened down, we have our power back on, we have our shield in place. So let's take a case and take a measure on it. So this one's 2.0215, and what we want is 2.015. So basically 6 thousandths shorter than this case. I don't think we're there. Took off a nice 1/2 thou. Let's try another one. Ooh, 2.0245. That's a long one. That one took a little brass. Still took 1/2 thou off. Okay, so we know we need to go in 6 thousandths. Take our shield off. And we need to go in so that the case will travel closer to the blades. So I'm going to loosen my lock nut. About that much. Put our shield back on. .0165 on that one, 017. You see it doesn't take much. Alright, I'm going to stop at 2.017. Okay, one little tip I'll offer is that if you are relying on measurements that you have to take a measurement off the case head with a caliper like this one, is to just be aware if you have any ejector marks or anything like that on the end of the case head, because those will protrude quite a bit, 2, 3, or 4 thousandths off the top of the case head. So you could come up with some weird measurements. It's not the first time or the last time that has happened to me, but it's just something to think about if you start getting some weird measurements. But anyway, I think we're good on Jake's brass here, so I'm just going to run through this, and then when I get done with this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a complete cutter change, and we'll cut some 300 Win Mag brass. One of the other things I've noticed is if you have some cases that are shorter than others in here, as long as they're pretty close, you might not get where it cuts the length of the case, but you'll still get some cutting action on the inside edge of that. So you'll get a little bit of a chamfer, which is enough to see the bullet the next time. I know that if I haven't trimmed cases, in other words, if I don't think I need to trim them, I'll still run a chamfering tool inside before I reload them. So that's kind of cool. This thing will take care of that for you too. And just like anything else, even if you don't need to do it, once you get a machine to do it, you just do it. Alright, let's change out the cutter head and do some 300 Win Mag brass. So the first thing we do is take the power supply away from it. We're going to take this shield off again. Okay, what I want to do now is I want to retain this screw. This will be the stop screw for all 260 Remington and 260 Terminator brass. So we'll just put that aside. Okay, so right here we have the cutter head. This is the 6.5 one, and we're going to replace it with this 308 cutter head. Okay, before we take this head off, let's take a real close look at it. You can get a good look at it right now. We've got our pilot, we've got our outside edge cutter here, and then around the other side, this is our inside cutter right there. And they're built right into it, they're adjustable, they come pre-adjusted, and they don't recommend that you adjust them yourself. So, you know, I just wouldn't mess with it. Don't touch that screw or that screw. Those are the ones that hold the blades in place. You also don't need to touch that screw. That's what holds the pilot in place. This is the only screw we're going to mess with when we change our cutter heads. Okay, to do this operation you need a 5/64 hex. If you're a Night Force shooter, you recognize that as that is the size of the turret set screws, the cap set screws. Alright, we don't want to lose that set screw, so we'll just put it back in. You can see what the drive looks like. There's a notch right here, and that's where the set screw sits. Here's our 308 cutter head. I'm just going to slip that on there. Tighten her down. You don't need to gorilla this. That's all there is to it. That's our 308 cutter head. So the next thing we want to do is we want to install the 300 Win Mag stop screw, and we're off to the races. Okay guys, what I'm doing with this 300 Win Mag brass is it's actually brand new Gunworks brass that I am using for my new 300 Win Mag barrel. What I did was I just decided that I'd clean up the ends on these. I've already run them over a mandrel to set my neck diameter and to clean up the necks on it really well. What I'm going to do is just clean them up. I just want to clean them up and start with a fresh surface. Plus it gives me an opportunity to demo this cutter head. But we're going to set it up the same way we just did Jake's 260. Put a case in, get it up here on the pilot. Oh, it's already hitting the screw. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I already set this one up earlier. But it's the same process. You just keep running the screw in until the case contacts the cutter heads. And then you need to figure out how much further you want to go in to get the cut you want at the length you want. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put that sucker right there. And don't forget this part. You want to tighten that lock nut so it sits against the spindle so that nothing's moving on you. And that should get me there. I just want a nice clean cut on the end of that case mouth. So basically what I'm doing is taking about 5/1000ths off these cases. So it's going to be 5/1000 shorter than the trim 2 length on a 300 Win Mag. 2.605. don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but those are carbide blades, so you should not have any problems with them at all, as long as you don't drop them on anything. Now I don't know how they'll work, say, on a nickel-plated case, but I read somewhere that the cutter head should last forever as long as you just use it on brass cases. Alright guys, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pop this 308 cutter head off and set it back up to cut and trim off my last 150 pieces of 6547 brass. So I'm just going to keep going here, not stop and point out anything. But remember, take the power off before you take that shield off. You got this one set screw for the cutter head. Okay, in case you're wondering, one thing I will mention is that the pilots on these are 5 to 6 thousandths smaller than bullet diameter. So while they support the case pretty well, they aren't going to hurt anything. But I think when you're done, it's probably a good idea to put it back in its plastic case so the carbide blades can't get hurt. Here's our 6.5 cutter head. Now there's a pretty wide slot there. I think it's probably just best practice to push that up against the end of the spindle, just as a reference point, so that it's always in the same place. That's all there is to it. So now I'm going to take my 300 Win Mag screw off. Put it with my 300 Win Mag brass and put my 6547 screw back in. Put the guard back on. That's all there is to it. So that was not only a caliber change, but that was also a cartridge change. So now we're ready to just get in and start cutting and trimming some 6547 brass. All right, I got a question about does this collect brass shavings at all? No, it doesn't. So, you know, this is out in my shop, so I'm not really all that worried about it. But I mean, if you're worried about it, you can rig up something to go under it. Probably what I would do is I would put it in a tray that it bolts through to mount, so that when you unbolt the trimmer, when you're done for the day, the tray is just sitting there. You can dump the tray out in your garbage can or whatever. But anyway, this is about 450 pieces of brass so far worth of brass shavings. And by the way, that shield works very well. I recommend that you wear safety glasses with this because there are, you know, little pieces of brass flying around, but I haven't even been dinged in the face with it at all while I'm running this machine. So that shield works pretty well. Well, I have the camera here. Let's go ahead and pop the handle off and take a look at the collet. So here's the collet, and you can see how the case head fits down inside that. And then when you squeeze this around it, it actually compresses that collet and holds it against the rim of the case here. Now, one thing I have noticed is that you'll want to make sure that this stays relatively clean. If you get anything in there like a chunk of carbon or say a piece of corncob media or anything at all on there that interferes with this case head sitting flat in whichever groove that it fits in, you could have potentially you can make it too long, or it can be cocked, or all kinds of things. But it hasn't really been a problem, but I see it as a preventative type thing to make sure nothing like that happens. Okay, from a review standpoint, this machine is it's obviously high quality. It's very smooth. You can see how it just slides on here very smoothly. It's all made out of aluminum and stainless steel. It's all made in the U.S. It was designed by Todd Henderson and Jason Chipley. Those guys are both competitive shooters, so they designed a machine that they would want to use for their reloading. So, you know, I really appreciate when guys like that design and build something, because odds are it's probably going to work pretty well. I know if I built something that I wanted to use for a specific task, I would make it work for that task. But anyway, this whole thing is very well built. It's sturdy. Yeah, I think it's probably over-engineered. It's a beautiful machine. The first thing you notice is the red. I know I did when I saw it for the first time at SHOT Show. One more thing. You can buy this a couple different ways. So you can buy this with or without the motor. If you look at the bracket right there in the back, this guy, this piece is what connects it to the motor housing. So there's a pulley in there and a belt that hooks onto the motor. If we were to take all this out of the way, there would be a shaft back there that you could run with a drill. So they sell this either with a, just the shaft and no motor, so you can run it with a drill, or they sell it as a powered unit. So this is the powered unit straight from their website. If you want, or if you already have one of these units that doesn't have the motor, you can buy the motor separately with the mounting hardware and turn it into this powered unit. Okay, as of right now, Forster offers those cutter heads from 224 up to 308. So 224, 243, 264, 284, 308. If you need a 338 cutter head, even though Forster doesn't make it, Henderson Precision can make you one and provide it with the machine. So if you need a 338, be sure to ask them about it. So the Gen 2 trimmer itself is available as just the trimmer, so you would have to supply your own drill or whatever to power this up. So you'd put a drill on the back of it and operate it the same way. I know if I was doing that, I'd try to figure out a way to mount it to the carriage on my lathe or something to spin it up. But I recommend going the motor route because, man, I'll tell you what, this is plug and play and about as easy as it gets for trimming cases. If you decide to just get the case trimmer, you can add this power unit to it. This piece here and the pulley and everything on the back will hook that right into the trimmer itself. Retail on this, going through Henderson Precision, is $739 for the whole unit, for the power unit, and that comes with one cutter head and one collet. If you buy the trimmer, just the trimmer by itself, it's $399. If you add the motor to it, it's $340. So it's the same price, just at a later date. Again, I highly recommend the motor, and I know there's a lot of gasp out there right now, especially from young guys who say, man, that's expensive. Well, let me tell you something from a guy with 30 years experience with doing this stuff. Buy this when you're young. Buy this when you start shooting and reloading. You will get a better investment, better return out of your investment. Now, I wouldn't have done it, and I'd have said the same thing to me if I was sitting in your place. So I can just offer you words of wisdom based on experience. Anyway, this thing is awesome. I think this is a quality machine. I think it's a good investment. I process up to 6,000 pieces of brass a year, sometimes more now that Jake is shooting. Jake has actually run this machine. It's easy to use. I'm sure you saw that in the video. It's easy to adjust. It's easy to change the cutter heads, and it's just easy. And after trimming brass manually with a whole variety of machines and cutter heads and tools and just about everything, I've tried just about everything except a powered unit. I wish I'd have bought something like this a long time ago. So I'll be doing a complete review on this for the website for panoutprecision.com. Until then, I'll be posting about it and showing you progress, and if anything changes, I'll let you know. If you want to order one of these, go right to hendersonprecision.com. They've got them on the website. I believe that's the only way to buy them right now. They do make a lot of other really cool stuff that's shooting related. Jake and I are trying out one of their Arca rail setups right now on Jake's McMillan A5 stock. That's working out very well. But I believe the trimmers are only sold through HendersonPrecision.com, so be sure to go check them out. I really like the machine. I recommend it. It's I'm sure it's going to hold up. It's built tough. So thanks for watching the video. We'll see you next time.